Welcome to Microcollege, a podcast exploring innovative, place-based, and humanly scaled responses to the crises in higher education, meaning, and discourse in our time. Everyone knows that colleges and universities are at a breaking point. But what can be done? At Microcollege, we ask this question to the people who are tackling the problem head-on, as well as asking accomplished people in all fields for their insights into these issues and what they think we can do about them. I'm Jacob Hunt, director of Thoreau College, a microcollege located in Viroqua, in the heart of the driftless region of southwestern Wisconsin. Inspired by the example of Deep Springs College, by the life of Henry David Thoreau, and by the ideas of Rudolf Steiner, founder of the Waldorf School movement, Thoreau College offers higher education for the whole human being through immersive residential programs for young adults. We also offer shorter programs for adults of all ages, offered through the Driftless Folk School. Today on Microcollege, we are honored to have two of the very small number of alumni of Thoreau College with us. And they are Liam McGilligan, who just a week ago finished up with the very first Metamorphosis year, a year-long program that started last August of 2021. And we're also joined by Jacob Rowland, who participated in our fall 2020 semester program and the spring 2021 summer fellowship and also the summer fellowship. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, Thoreau College, it's a microcollege, and it is very young. We've had 2 semester programs and a year-long program, Metamorphosis year. And so our alumni, a very small number of people. And your insights and your ideas are really important evidence for us and also for the microcollege movement. So thank you for being with us. I'd like to ask. So Liam came into Thoreau College into this year having already completed an undergraduate degree. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your educational background, where you're from, and just what you were doing during your traditional ages of college.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin. I was born and raised there. I went to Henry David Thoreau Elementary School, kindergarten through 5th grade. So way back in the day, maybe this Thoreau College was already kind of coalescing in my mind, so I went to public schools in Madison, graduated from Madison West High in 2016, and then I went to the University of Minnesota, where I was a student in the Guthrie Theater Actor Training Program, which is an acting conservatory. It was a partnership between the University of Minnesota College of Liberal Arts and the Guthrie Theater, which is kind of a flagship American regional theater, the most prominent, biggest budget theater in the Twin Cities. So kind of through that, it was a heavy emphasis on, classical theater, Shakespeare, Ibsen, Shaw, Chekhov, and all sorts of new plays too, and dance and movement. And, being that it was at the College of Liberal Arts at the University of Minnesota, there was obviously a liberal arts component to that too. So I really feel like it was an acting conservatory in terms of, we studied theater, we studied plays, we studied acting techniques, Stanislavski, Meisner. But we also, it was really like a literature degree too. And we had this amazing class, theater history, that was a year long, ancient Greece up to the present day. And the emphasis in that class was really on theater historiography. What were the conditions that led to what type of theater was being created at different times. So that was what I was studying at the University of Minnesota, and it was very interesting. The University of Minnesota has like 50,000 students, I think 40,000 undergraduates, and 8,000 or so graduates, and then a couple thousand postgraduates. And but the program that I was in was we started with 20 students and we ended with 16 in my class. So at any given time, there were no more than probably 80 or so students in the program. And it was a very, very insular program, very, very unique, niche program, isolated from the rest of the university. And so I was a part of this huge Big Ten university in a large metropolitan area, but had this unique partnership with the Guthrie Theater, where over the years, more and more, my classes were actually at the Guthrie Theater. I was less and less, I was actually at the University of Minnesota. And in a way, it was sort of a micro college within this larger university. and we were kind of autonomous, kind of got to do our own thing, but in some ways, we had to report to the demands or the bureaucracy of the larger university. So that was a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. That's I was really fascinated to learn from you about that program. It does sound, there's aspects of the Microcollege built into the mega college there, Big Ten University. So coming out of that experience, what made you want to go into another type of a program, in a different, into Thoreau College?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I've said this a number of times before, but it was an acting conservatory, but there was a liberal arts component to it too, and that's what drew me to the program originally too, was because I never intended, I don't intend to be, and I don't think I ever intended to be just an actor and just a theater actor. And when I was auditioning for the program, and then when I got in, one of the, I could pull it up somewhere, but one of their taglines or one of their, their calling card was that, the Guthrie Theater Actor Training Program seeks to cultivate the actor, artist, scholar, and citizen. And so for me, I was interested absolutely in being an actor, but the fact that I could also cultivate, I could be a scholar and I could be an artist in other disciplines and I could be a citizen was absolutely enticing to me too. And I feel like that's what I got. But, still the emphasis was, if you were to choose a number, maybe 75% of it was like actor training, right? Mm. So when I came out of that and I, kind of got out of college, I graduated in May of 2020, so navigating the early stages of the pandemic. Ended up moving to New York City, and after a period of time, I just kind of started to think, I am also a scholar and an artist and a citizen, and I wanted to, follow the questions, around those things more. And so I started thinking I, would want to go back to school, but I knew that I didn't want to just choose, surf the web, find some degree that kind of made sense to me, and then pay way too much money to pursue that. And so when I found Thoreau College, it was like for me, it was a graduate school of liberal arts. It was, the 5 pillars: community, art, nature, labor, academics. Like I said, actor, artist, scholar, citizen. So the scholar, the artist, the citizen, those are 3 components, I would say, of Thoreau College too. Community / self-governance, that's a citizenship. Scholar, that's academics. Artist, that's art, obviously. And so I felt like Thoreau was a place to explore those other 3 things that I got to dip my feet into at the University of Minnesota, but to do it in a completely different context, in a completely different place. In my home state, but further not in my hometown.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my sense is that the Driftless region here is also a real interest of yours. So the place-based aspect of it was important. Cool, mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Well, turning now to Jacob Rowland. Jacob, you came into Thoreau College in the crazy middle of 2020 in a bit more of a traditional gap year type experience coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your previous education and what you found attractive about why you thought about coming to Thoreau College?
Yeah, so I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I was lucky enough to go to a pretty small high school of around 100 students with a very sort of non-traditional approach to education, sort of more of a close relationship with teachers and experiential learning and stuff. But I think that Thoreau was more of a surprise to me. It was 2020, we had cut off school, but right at the end sort of my senior year, I had really been going through sort of a renaissance of starting to take an interest in literature and philosophy and nature and kind of more of a intentional self-creation as I kind of felt like I was becoming an adult. I with all this sort of free time, which I got because of COVID, I started sort of dipping my toes into gardening, started like composting in my backyard and growing carrots and
Yeah, remember in your essay you wrote very movingly about compost.
oh, thank you.
It was
Yes.
very impressive.
And I read Walden and had sort of begun like my philosophical education, particularly because of a teacher I had in the last year of high school, who really kind of inspired me. So, kind of really, really rapidly from, say, like the beginning of my senior year to the end of the senior year, I had sort of shifted into a totally new person, much more sort of receptive or interested in kind of alternatives to the traditional kind of path of high school to college, specialization in a sort of major, and I was really kind of, for the first time, taking learning into my own hands. So I found out about Thoreau College through Deep Springs, which was a model that was really interesting to me. But yeah, I sort of, this was all kind of flooding out of me in a very short amount of time, that I kind of desired autonomy, labor, connection to nature, philosophical inquiry, and sort of taking myself into my own hands for the first time.
Yeah, that's your story, and I think it's been a common theme among students who've come to Thoreau College so far. Is this period of life, whether it is the last year or two of high school or the time that people are coming out of an undergraduate degree, really this window between 18 and 21 or 25 years old, it's one of these it's the transition to adulthood, a major transition, and you do see rapid changes in people's interests and their habits and their outlooks on life. And I do think one of the purposes of a microcollege, one of the roles it can play, is to be a place that holds that transition, and a community which supports it, faculty members and cultural activities and other sorts of work that supports that transition to a new identity, to a new self, really.
Microcollege is recorded in the broadcast studios of WDRT Viroqua 91.9 FM Driftless Community Radio on Main Street in Viroqua, Wisconsin. Thanks to Jim and all the folks at WDRT for the support of Thoreau College and the Microcollege podcast.
So you spent a year here in Viroqua and into the summer, really a whole calendar year, and then you spent the last year at Oberlin College. I think, how has that been? And I guess maybe to focus on what are the positives? What have you enjoyed about it, and what's worked well?
About
Oberlin.
So Oberlin has sort of been, if Thoreau was maybe the bridge to adulthood, Oberlin is more of the ground on the other side. It's certainly like a different experience being at a traditional college, even one that's like admittedly small, liberal arts focused, has a great kind of alternative history. It is more something that I'm really glad that I kind of went in with sort of a primer on adult life and scholarship and community. I think it requires a much more intentional approach. It's not going to guide you into kind of these deep kind of levels of understanding of yourself, engagement with other people or ideas. I think it's much more of a kind of wide open field, which allows for a really great depth, but unprepared, I think, is not really something that you can take advantage of.
So your sense that your time that you spent here at Thoreau was enabled you to take better advantage of that?
Absolutely, yeah. If like before I came to Thoreau, I sort of received this great interest in learning about literature and philosophy and nature and art. Thoreau was kind of the site setting the try these things on, do some really kind of deep engagement with them, kind of get a lay of the land, see where you want to go, see where you want to kind of avoid for now. And, by the time I was done, kind of, I felt ready to sort of go out into a wider field, I guess, and know exactly or approximately where I was going.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that background. And I guess I'd like to, so Thoreau College, obviously is emphasizing the small Microcollege. We're also using the word college, right? So we should need to examine that word a little bit, what that means. And as Liam was mentioning, our curriculum is built around 5 pillars: academics, labor, community, nature, and art. And those show up, in all of our programs in various ways. So I guess I'd like to ask both of you. You alluded to a little bit, but I guess having been here in Baroque, having been part of Thoreau College for a year, each of you, can you talk about the micro size of this? So when we talk about a microcollege, the definition has been programs that are 50 students or less. Deep Springs, one of our key models, is under 30 students, between 25 and 30 students, and the program that Jacob Rowland participated in ranged between 11 to 15 students in some way throughout the year. And Liam's class, which just graduated last week, had 7 students. So very small groups of people. I wonder if you could, both of you, talk about what are the benefits of that scale, and also maybe what are some of the drawbacks of that scale.
Right. I was just thinking what was so special to me about Thoreau was that in any group of people, there are going to be kind of enormous differences. And specifically, Thoreau draws on kind of so many diverse people from all kind of diverse walks of life, people headed in all kinds of different directions. And in a kind of bigger college, I've experienced you don't encounter those people that are particularly different from you very much, or at least you don't feel kind of the desire to get kind of very, very closely acquainted with them to kind of see the world through their eyes, because there's kind of endless stories of people just like you who will talk about exactly the same things you always want to talk about. And I found at Thoreau, I was so surprised that these people who were not like me, did not want to talk about Plato and did not want to, or whatever, were so amazingly deep and interesting, and impacted my life so profoundly, even though we're on entirely different paths. I found that living together, working together, struggling through kind of difficult texts together, being in class, and spending time in nature together has brought people together, which I sort of could not have imagined could have formed connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that experience. I think that I did experience this at the University of Minnesota because I was in a group of 16 people and we pretty much spent all our time together, even though we had this larger thing. But we still had this huge campus and this huge city kind of to disappear into. And if we didn't want to interact with people, or we just wanted to, not deal with those things, we had, so many options. But at Thoreau, you are forced to, this microcollege context forces you to confront those things. You can't really just hide from them, and that is a challenge, but was a very valuable learning experience. I suppose it taught me that there really is diversity everywhere. you know, it just kind of, you have to open your eyes to it.
Yeah, I think that points to not only the size of Thoreau College itself and the composition, but also our location, right? So we're located here in Viroqua, which is a town of about 4,500 people in a very rural county. Lots of agricultural activity here, and this is actually similar to a number of our peers in the microcollege movement, which tend to be in rural communities or in wilderness locations, or in general, are also located in communities on the small end of the spectrum. So I wonder if you could talk about that. I mean, both of you grew up in bigger towns or lived in cities. What was it like for you to come here to rural southwestern Wisconsin, and how did that contribute to your educational experience?
Well, growing up in Madison, I don't know when was the first time I kind of heard about the Driftless region or heard about Viroqua, but it started creeping into my consciousness probably sometime in high school. And I think that has something to do with, the youth initiative, probably. A lot. I think there's a lot of traffic between Viroqua and Madison, and Viroqua and Milwaukee, or the Twin Cities, or Chicago, and other places. And so probably as interesting people and artists and thinkers started, growing up in Viroqua and graduating from Youth Initiative, which is...
Yeah, so Liam's mentioning Youth Initiative High School, which is the Waldorf alternative high school here in Viroqua. An important part of our local context is a thriving Waldorf education scene here, elementary and high school, that's been in operation for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think just as, I start going to... I go to a house show in Madison when I'm 18 or 19, and this band is from Viroqua, and these people are, that's one experience. I think that was kind of a beginning, like kind of a seed being planted, and I suppose coming here, at least the transition is, we've talked about this a little bit this year, but one of the things that my eyes... Maybe I knew it already subconsciously, but something that my eyes have been open to, and now I totally see it everywhere, is, that college, the traditional path that Jacob Rowland was talking about, is not, it's evidence here that it's not necessary not that it's a bad thing, but that it's not necessary for success or for happiness. There are so many people I've met around here who are doing such cool things, groundbreaking things in art, in education, in agriculture, in community, in business, who have taken non-traditional paths their whole life or didn't go to college at all. And that is, that's like a big thing we're sold, I think, growing up in most places, is like, this is the path that you have to take to be successful and be happy and make something of your life. And I always hoped and dreamed and was like, yeah, that's not true. But there weren't so many examples around of that being true. I was like, that's obviously not true, but I didn't have any proof of it. And one thing that I've definitely learned here is that it is true. It absolutely is true.
Jacob, do you have any comment about coming from LA to Wisconsin, small town Wisconsin?
Yeah, I was always trying to discover why it wasn't such a shock. I think, of course, Viroqua is a very kind of unique place with an incredible kind of artistic and intellectual and community scene going on. I think that, I was very kind of possessed, as I think a lot of people at around 18 or 19 are, with this sort of radical want to sort of get away from typical life, right? Like, as Thoreau did, sort of set out into the woods, write big, bold proclamations about how, people should get rid of all their furniture and live in a shack or something. I think, perhaps it strikes at different times for different people, but I think a lot of people go through this kind of radical need to be somewhere totally new, dive into something new, in a way kind of fake it till you make it, right? Like, don't stop yourself by saying, no, I'm not from here, but sort of dive in and see yourself as a citizen of a new place, and kind of a person who leads a radically different lifestyle to the one that you're used to. So it came at the right time for me, and I sort of dove in.
Yeah, I think that there's a perception of small-town America as being lacking diversity, which it does in some ways, but also as a place that's boring, right? I think, and that even applies to people who grew up here, I would say. So is it boring? Is it a like sterile kind of cultural environment? Would you say?
Absolutely not.
No. But I do have to, like you said, I do have to wonder what the experience would be like, or what the learning would have been like if, I had gone to a town that wasn't like Viroqua, Viroqua is known as the town that beat Walmart. Most small towns have not beat Walmart. What would it have been like if I went to a town, somebody started a college in a town that, not to be, just to be frank, had a Dollar Tree and a gas station and a bait and tackle shop, That would be a different experience, for sure. So I do have to wonder.
Yeah, there's a confirmation bias of some kind built into that situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly, as I grew up in this area, I'm a local, grew up on a farm in the local area and lived here most of my life. And certainly, one of the reasons that I'm working on, starting a college here, is for the benefit of the local community. I think that projects like Thoreau College, as well as the Waldorf schools, and now the many other cultural initiatives here, they bring life to a place like this and make it a great place to live. So I think it's reciprocal, right? I think that you're right to ask that question.
The Driftless Folk School, located in the beautiful rolling hills and valleys of southwest Wisconsin, is a community of lifelong learners dedicated to cultivating personal and cultural resilience through hands-on educational experiences. The Driftless Folk School offers classes in agriculture, land stewardship, natural history, folk arts and crafts, herbalism, wilderness skills, and more. For further information on the Driftless Folk School, visit us at driftlessfolkschool.org on the World Wide Web.
Liam, I want to go back to something that you were talking about a moment ago. So we've talked a bit about what the benefit is of being micro scale, some of the benefits of that. I wonder, when I talk to people, especially older people, about gap year programs or micro colleges, these kind of structured ways of interacting, in new ways with the world after high school or after in young adulthood, sometimes people will ask, well, why can't people just do that on their own? Why can't they just go and, when I was growing up, when I was that age in the 1970s or the 1960s, I went and hitchhiked around Europe and worked on farms, or I went and lived in the city. And what's the benefit of having, let's say, a college or a structured educational environment rather than just winging it?
Mm-hmm. Well, my experience has been that although there's been structure here that has kind of maybe led me in a certain direction, I would say my experience was more that Thoreau provided a context for me to embark on a self-education. Thoreau is in a community like Viroqua, where there are people and there are businesses and there are events that created a context for me to do what you are talking about. And there certainly are many different barriers today to just up and walking from Paris to New Delhi on the hippie trail and learning that there's certain barriers to doing that now, but that doesn't mean that there aren't different contexts being created like here in Viroqua. So that was my experience. I think that the structure here has not been rigid. It's been in something. Actually, I'm recalling something that we read in a book at the University of Minnesota in my program. Just the one kind of topic that this book covered. It was called Free Play by Stephen Nachmanovich, and he was talking about the power of limits. And that basic and how, you know, creating a framework for yourself or structures for yourself actually enables you to, well, transcend those structures or to take initiative or agency over your own learning or your own life. So I don't feel like the structure's been rigid. I feel like it's created a context for me to, well, break it down, but to take an agency over my own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's great wisdom in the college. The idea of the college, I don't think that any kind of experiment with alternative education is trying to sort of dig at the foundations of institutions of higher learning. And I think, Liam, you're right that when thinking about freedom, it can be interesting to play with or think about the ways in which we limit ourselves in order to get greater freedom. I think entering into any kind of college is more of a limit than bumming it and like, yeah, walking around with a knapsack and hitchhiking. But I think that through that sort of conscious taking on of limits, we're first of all able to conceive of the act of limitation and kind of know what we're doing, what the point of college is better than kind of entering it unquestioningly. And we're also allowing for a greater kind of freedom. I found a lot at Thoreau that like when we sort of agreed upon or came to a consensus on certain sort of ways we wanted to live collectively, that allowed a sort of freedom which isn't available to someone who has no associations and kind of is just winging it themselves. That the freedom to rely on people, the freedom to kind of do great projects and be in a very close community and sort of grow together, I think is a great freedom which is acquired through the taking on of limitations.
Yeah, that's very well put, I think. Yeah, so the limitations, one of the key limitations, as you were alluding to before, is the size and the scope of the school, both the faculty and of the students. So there are, if you're engaging in collective self-governance, which is a core kind of value of the college, you're having to take into account the opinions of other people, the needs of other people, different systems of values, different standards of, let's say, timeliness or cleanliness. Those sorts of things are real world sort of things that if you've committed to some period of time, whether it's a semester, a year, or longer, in a small community, that's going to be, those are limits you're going to need to work with very actively.
Mm-hmm. And I think that on limitation, Thoreau has kind of let me, more consciously in the future take on further limitations in education and in life. Like I see now progressing from Thoreau, sort of this more open, alternative, free college towards a more traditional college, that it's mostly kind of a taking on of greater limitations in exchange for kind of more specialization, depth in certain sort of areas of study. But had I not really thought deeply about why I was limiting myself to that, I feel like it would feel pretty pointless.
Yeah. So that's something I wanted to ask you both about as well, which is, so the kind of the slogan, the tagline of Thoreau College has been higher education for the whole human being. And so we're practicing or seeking to practice, a broad form of, we could say, an expanded liberal arts that includes not just a broad range of academic disciplines, but also other modes of life. So in this case, it means community self-governance, learning how to run a meeting, making decisions together, about finances and rules and schedules and all of this. It also means manual physical labor. The Thoreau College runs a greenhouse and a small farm, cooks food together, maintains our facilities together. So there are hands-on and merely physical types of skills and routines that are part of the curriculum. We also incorporate the arts, which includes singing and visual arts and sometimes theater and traditional folk crafts, things like that. And then there's nature, which includes a deep immersion into expeditions and solos and familiarity with local plants and animals and the seasons. So that really spreads us thin in some ways. The students really are exposed to lots of things. And I guess as one of the designers of this curriculum, my hope is that something in that mix, there is something that a student feels they really connect with and they feel really good at and they're natural for it. And there's something that they find really hard. Right, something that's frustrating or something that they would never have chosen to do before. I guess I wonder if you could talk about that range, having that breadth of activity in the curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think there's a great passage in Walden where he mentions Thoreau mentions someone, I think, coming up to his cabin trying to sell him baskets. And he sort of is like, he conceives of the work that he's doing, kind of solitude, observation of nature, writing and reading, as his own sort of, he's weaving his own baskets. So I think that when we sort of are able to encounter all these kind of different ways of coming to know the world, coming to engage with the world, know ourselves, we can see kind of what we are doing with kind of clearer vision. Of course, not all of us are going to become like basket weaving, trout fishing, shed building, like scholars who like also, camp in the wilderness every weekend. Like the goal of this breadth partially is to inform us for kind of our later specializations, to see kind of that, first of all, that intellectual knowledge is not privileged above folk knowledge, above knowing how to build things, how to fix things, how to be in nature, how to be in community. Yeah. And so I think it's firstly, the kind of liberal curriculum is helping us conceive of the different ways of being or, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure actually I would be the most well-equipped person to answer this question but it leads me to a question for you maybe, Jacob, but for me is, I don't know, even before, my whole life actually I feel like, I played like 8 or 10 different sports from log rolling to ultimate frisbee, like just, I did ballet for a couple years, I went to church till I was like 7 and like, I've just, I feel, I guess, blessed, grateful that my parents, just threw me into anything and let me experience it. And if I didn't like it, they let me move on to something else. And then the whole, at the University of Minnesota, we had long days, 5 days a week, sometimes even 6 days a week. I mean, like, liberal arts classes from like 9 to 1 or 2, and then theater and acting classes from like, the early afternoon till the evening, then dinner, then rehearsal from 7 to 11 p.m. And all the time, our teachers were like, hey, we're going to be doing things that you're not going to understand, that aren't going to make sense to you, that you might not like. It might never serve you, but it also might take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years for you to realize what we're doing today. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's always been a part of, and that was challenging growing up, always doing different things, but it was also invigorating. It was the same at the University of Minnesota. It was the same here. And so of course it was challenging, but I guess I haven't ever and wouldn't ever conceive it in a different way. But what that leads me to is, I think Thoreau, from my view, is reacting to many things that are happening in our society right now. But one of those things is sort of this is reacting to this idea that is rejecting, I guess, suffering, or rejecting deep challenges, and saying, that that's a bad thing, that we don't deserve that we should just eliminate hardship. And I wonder what you think, Jacob, about, especially, having founded this college 6 years ago, being a faculty member and founding Student at Youth Initiative, and always being involved in alternative education, how you've seen that problem develop, and what, did it get to a point that was so dire and so obvious? What compelled you to try to address that problem?
So the problem that you're asking about is the prioritization of comfort, of the easy, or the yeah. Well, I think that is that's, first of all, a fundamental challenge for any affluent society, right? And as an educator, in the high school level, and certainly now in the last several years of working with college students at Thoreau, I definitely see a sizable portion, a meaningful number of young people. Of course, I have a very strange sample size and origin. Again, the problem of confirmation bias is always there, but I do see young people seeking, as Thoreau did, really the bedrock of reality, right? Whether that is suffering or just really the way things work, right? How does money work? How does agriculture work? How do governments and groups make decisions? And what is all indeed spiritual realities? What underlies reality in some fundamental sense? I think that's always been a quality of youth, right? Testing the limits of reality, testing limits of themselves. And often, and I think essentially in some levels, suffering is a part of that, right? A person who never experiences something really hard, something really difficult, knows on some level, conscious or unconsciously, that they're missing some fundamental experience. They don't know the limits of themselves and the nature of reality in some way. And Thoreau, is one of the reasons that Henry David Thoreau is one of our inspirations, is that he was very explicit about that, right? He went into the woods to live deliberately, to examine what was necessary, what was essential, and to do things like figure out what is the minimum I can live on, basically, in terms of human contact, in terms of food, in terms of things. In our society today, which is direct lineal descendant of the society that Thoreau was living in, we have lots of stuff. We have got lots of security. We've got lots of there are ways that it is easy to live here. But I think on a spiritual level or on an inner level, especially for a young person, there's something missing. There's some fundamental part of self-knowledge that's missing. And so, yes, that is absolutely part of this. The curriculum design is to, in some way or another, give people opportunity to experience that. Just to give a really explicit example, probably the easiest for most people to understand is the expedition and solo curriculum. So we, in each of the 3 years that we've had extended programs, we've had a sequence of both group expeditions, which sometimes are canoe trips or they're hikes or they're just camping in a remote location for a week, and then also a sequence of solos. So these are without a tent, with a tarp and a little fire, in a forested location for periods of ranging from 24 to 48 hours in all seasons. So from beautiful weather in the fall all the way through in December when we do a 48-hour solo. Sometimes temperatures are down below zero. And when people first hear about that, sometimes they're kind of horrified by it. But consistently, it is one of the most valuable parts of our curriculum in the sense that you can see students face fears and face inner and outer challenges and come out of it in a way that there's a marked kind of confidence and inner transformation. And I think that in whether that's in a social context or an academic context, reading difficult, hard texts or difficult sort of hand manual skills, those are things that a good education provides and supports students in experiencing.
Thoreau College is a leader in an emergent movement dedicated to the renewal and revitalization of higher education through the creation of new, humanly scaled institutions with holistic curricula known as microcolleges. Thoreau College, higher education for the whole human being.
Yeah, Jacob, you are, I think you're definitely a person who loves books. And you're on the scholar end of things here, and I guess when you came back to town after your year in Oberlin, you made it felt like a confession, which is that you're questioning the role of philosophy in education. But which is an interesting confession to make. But I guess I'm wondering if you can talk about the academic sides of things here. I mean, what do you see based on your experience in high school and here at Thoreau and now in a more conventional college? What is the role of texts, of ideas, and intellectual life in general education?
Right. So, of course, I think texts are, in a way, people's first thought of education, maybe a little bit less so now. But, education, it's not a school without books. It can be a school without living there. It can be a school without working. It can be a school without being in nature. Usually it's not a school without books. But I think that Thoreau is not just kind of the kind of blind worship of reading texts in order to acquire knowledge or even wisdom. I think that Thoreau treats texts much more as an experience or an encounter similar to being in nature, being outside. So, it's less about kind of holding up particular ideas that we want to sort of drill into into the students, and more sort of seeing books as an exercise in thinking. So
it is important which books we read?
Right. I mean, that's the eternal question. And I think that yes and no. I want to read sort of the great kind of books of the world of history, which I sort of see as all in conversation with each other. And I think that at Thoreau, first of all, I was exposed to so many amazing texts, and kind of got the freedom to explore them. I would just kind of come up to you, Jacob, all the time and be like, have you read this? Have you read that? What do you think about this? And certainly there were plenty of people here who I had kind of these really, really deep, heady, intellectual relationships with. But I think really, the main sort of text takeaway for me of Thoreau was the method, was the sitting around in a circle around a few kind of key texts, and really just dissecting them, trying them on, arguing over them. And I think, the core curriculum of Thoreau was not exactly canonical. It was explorations into the canon, but it was not a sort of Mortimer Adler great books education. It was more like these texts are interesting and strange and have proven that they can be good devices for thinking. So let's kind of try to think with them, but let's do it in the context of the other things we're doing. So let's go read Thoreau in the woods. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the plants that he talks about. Let's read Braiding Sweetgrass, and do our sweetgrass basketry and our
mm-hmm.
So I think that text at Thoreau sort of were incorporated into life more than read for the sake of reading. I think personally, I got more of an experience of deep reading for its own sake, and obviously, I think that's the basket that I'm weaving right now in my life, and I think that that's what I've chosen sort of to pursue after Thoreau. studying literature at college. And Thoreau had an amazing kind of freedom that let me dive really, really deeply into that, into literature, and also let other people dive really deeply into folk skills or art or anything.
Yeah, I think for me, having, one of the reasons to have college as a form, and I think that word college still has this academic connotation, which is important, is that the types of conversations that you're describing, they rarely happen outside of something that it might be called a college or university, right? Or it's very difficult to cultivate that space. People, people read, right? People, watch classic cinema. They appreciate art. But the context to have an ongoing conversation about it is something that is somewhat rare in our society, and it's held traditionally in liberal arts colleges or in university contexts. And so if we lose that, and I think that we really are, one of these crises that we're alluding to is the decline of the liberal arts as a form, a much more a vocationalization of college or a narrowing of academic specialty. We lose those places where I think really some of the really important work of our culture comes from. So glad that you found that here, and that's certainly one of the goals. Liam, I wanted to ask you a similar question about the arts. You came out of a drama school, in arts, the theater. What role does this theater and the other, fine arts have in a general education?
Well, this is I think this question is being it's being asked a lot right now. I think it's a good question. I suppose I have always had a hope that, I had a view, I guess, of the theater as well as revered, along with also a lot of other academic or artistic disciplines. And I suppose, part of my moving away from acting and drama a little bit in the past is one, like I said, because I've been wanting to explore, the scholar in me and the artist and the citizen in me, but also because I think that, the origins of theater, back to ancient Greece, but then even as recently as 100 years ago, it's just become diluted and separated from its origin, increasingly. And, I had an unsettling experience a couple months ago. I went to see a play for the first time in 2 years, when I was in the Twin Cities. And, there were so many barriers to entry to get into the theater. And, I always pictured the theater as a place to, a gathering where an audience and a company are sharing a space together, sharing one breath, sharing one laugh. But I felt like, every single person, you had to present a vaccination card to get in. Every single person was masked. And it just felt hypocritical to me. It didn't feel right to me at all. And I feel like that is kind of the logical conclusion that the theater has come to when its origins was in ancient Greece, a religious ritual where the entire town came together to share in the stories of their gods. And then in Shakespearean times, the Globe Theater, where, in the back row you had the aristocracy, and on the ground you had the groundlings who were drunk and peeing themselves during the performances, but they were all there together.
The good old days.
Not that we want to go back to that, but all there together, unvarnished, sharing in the pain and the misery and the joy of the story, without barriers. And even before COVID, and now these new barriers to live performances of all kind, most people don't like Shakespeare anymore because Shakespeare for the last 75 years or so has been presented as the greatest thing on earth and very elite and inaccessible. Right. And so I feel like it used to be
just on the written page primarily in schools.
Yeah. And so to your question, I think that it plays a huge role because the theater. And before you even say theater, just stories. There's an oral tradition. The oral tradition is an intangible aspect of human heritage. And so I feel like probably for a long time, it was just kind of like, well, of course we are going to, of course this is a vital part of how we understand ourselves. And but like you said, this increasing specialization at colleges has maybe taken theater with it and pigeonholed it into this very specific thing that is no longer inaccessible or that is no longer accessible. But I just started reading Back to Methuselah by Bernard Shaw yesterday. Myra, who's another Thoreau College student, showed it to me. It's called Back to Methuselah, a metabiological Pentateuch. and he writes there's 30 essays and then 5 plays. And one takes place 4,000 years ago in the Garden of Eden, and that's the first one. And the last play takes place in the year 32,000. And then the ones in between are, different ages of humanity. Wow. And it was like, this is a play, right? These are plays, but this is also like an epic. This is a novel. This is a textbook. This is it's a metabiological Pentateuch. It's a philosophical text. And I feel like those things play a huge part in education. But we're seeing now a play is just a play. And it's often presented inaccessibly. And it seems to not mean anything besides la 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 la. We're performing as opposed to we're collaborating. Mm-hmm.
I think what the strand that connects what you were just saying, Liam, and what Jacob Rowland was saying, the liberal arts curriculum, as traditionally understood, was had to do with freedom, right? Liberty, and that had to do with really empowering people to be good communicators, right, and also thinkers. And a lot of that has to do with storytelling, right? And so whether the stories are in texts, right, or they're on the stage, or they're in their sort of artistic media, right? The working through of our experiences and of the really the raw data of life in storytelling form is an important step towards being a free person. So that's part of the goal of this curriculum. So we're coming up towards the end of our period here, and I just want to thank our guests here today, Liam McGilligan, Jacob Rowland. Thank you for sharing your experience, and thank you for being a part of Thoreau College over the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.